let's talk about the Jehovah's Witnesses, because on Monday, a Norwegian court upheld a decision to rescind the religious community status of the Jehovah's Witnesses. And basically, the big takeaway here is that this blocks the Jehovah's Witnesses from getting taxpayer-funded subsidies, which is a big deal, which I will talk about in a second, and they can't perform legal marriages anymore, which is a smaller issue, but also that's kind of a thing religions do. And it took 2 years to get to this point and a lawsuit. And the government warned the Jehovah's Witnesses this could happen, and now it finally happened. And basically, the reason this is a welcome decision is because the Norwegian government is treating the Jehovah's Witnesses like any other group, and they're not giving them preferential treatment just because they're a religion, which, coming from the United States, that's incredible. And this will, I mean, if you are a practicing Jehovah's Witness, you're fine. You could still be a Jehovah's Witness. It doesn't ban anyone from practicing the faith. It doesn't stop people from gathering in kingdom halls and practicing their faith or anything like that. The only thing that happens is you're not going to get gifts from the government just because you're a member of this group. Okay? You're not going to get a taxpayer gift. And let me back up for a second. Here's the issue in Norway. Norway's funny because it has a national church, but it doesn't actually have a national religion. But it's a country where religion is literally supported by taxpayers. Like, the more members you have, the more money your religion gets. And that applies to humanist groups as well. And basically, this is one article. This is from the US State Department, but let me show you this. According to their own research, like, all registered faith and life stance organizations are eligible to apply for financial support from the government. The government pays prorated subsidies to 724 such organizations based on their membership numbers, at least in 2021, which is when this article is from, as compared to membership numbers of the Church of Norway. So basically, if you're a religious group and you say, hey, we're Pastafarians, we're a religion, and we have more than 50 members, you can apply to get these federal subsidies so you could practice your faith. It's kind of amazing. 724 groups have gotten that type of funding in 2021. And the law is very open about what counts as a religion. However, there are a few lines in the sand when it comes to this. And let me show you this. I'm going to start sharing a few. They look like sketchy websites. And the reason is that I would love to show you the official Norwegian websites, but they're in another language and won't make sense. But there are websites that have like crude translations of what the law says. But here's the issue. Look at this. Grounds for refusing grants. When is the government allowed to say, yeah, we're not giving your group money? If a faith or belief community or individuals acting on behalf of the community use violence or coercion, make threats, violate children's rights, violate statutory prohibitions on discrimination, or in other ways seriously violate the rights and freedoms of others, they may not get any money. Those are the rules. That's how it works. If you're doing some really bad stuff, no money for you. I mean, I feel like that makes sense. They're not going to deny you money just because they don't like what you believe, though, right? That makes sense. Like, a group that endorses violence should not get taxpayer money. And if your group wants to hurt kids or violate human rights, you shouldn't get money. And I know there are atheists who may argue, like, well, if they're teaching kids creationism, or there's any form of religious indoctrination going on, that counts as child abuse. Okay, that's a philosophical stance you may have. But for the government's purposes, they are limiting themselves to things that are irrefutable and not up for debate. Okay, so that doesn't count. But here's what they do count. If your group forces people to be members, that violates the rules. You can't ban members of your group from interacting with non-members. You can't like create a bubble like a cult and say you're only allowed to talk to these people, and anyone else you're forbidden from speaking to. No, now you're violating the rules. You can't make kids pledge a lifelong commitment to your religion because the kid's stupid. It's a kid. They don't know any better. That violates children's rights. And like basically practicing faith is fine, but cult like behavior is not tolerated. And if any group crosses those boundaries, they might lose government funding. So this is where we get to the Jehovah's Witnesses, because in 2021, according to a lot of information, here we go. Let me show you this. This is from another one of those sites that's crudely translated into English. According to an overview from the Ministry of Children and Families, there were 12,686 subsidy paying members in Jehovah's Witnesses in 2021. And according to the administrator, because they had like 12,000 plus members, they get 16 million Norwegian monies. That amounts to like almost $2 million US dollars. They got about $2 million in support because they had that many members. So in 2021, the government said, we're going to explore your beliefs here because we're disturbed. Basically, there were two former Jehovah's Witnesses and another whistleblower who sent the government letters saying the Jehovah's Witnesses are violating the rules. And it's not that their beliefs were secret, but government officials kind of needed that paperwork in order to get the investigation rolling. They can't just say, what should we do today? Hey, let's go pick on the Jehovah's Witnesses. No, they needed paperwork that said we're members and they're violating the rules. The government gets that information and they say, all right, we'll investigate. And so some of those claims were open to debate. For example, the Jehovah's Witnesses say members cannot get involved in politics. That's why Jehovah's Witnesses, even if you know any, they do not vote in elections. One former member argued to the government that since voting in an election could lead to you getting kicked out of the witnesses, which means members of the Jehovah's Witnesses could not interact with you, the no voting rule violated the law. Well, the witnesses responded to that, like Jehovah's Witness leaders responded to that saying, we're allowed to set our own rules. And if someone wants to vote, they're allowed to vote. And then, yeah, they would be kicked out, but that's their decision. There's nothing coercive about that. And the government said, yeah, you guys, you can have your wacky beliefs. We don't care about that. But there were a couple concerns that the government took very seriously. Number one, the Jehovah's Witnesses engage in something called disfellowshipping. Basically, if you choose to not be a Jehovah's Witness anymore, you're effectively excommunicated from the group. Members are told they cannot have any meaningful interactions with you. Like, if you personally decided, I don't believe in God anymore, I think I'm going to leave the Jehovah's Witnesses, but your parents are still alive and they are practicing JWs, they cannot interact with you anymore. They are told, nope, just don't answer their calls. If they call you, you don't answer it. That's how it works. It tears apart families. It is horrifying what they put people through. And the idea is that those people who have left the fold, they will get so lonely, they will get so depressed that they will come crawling back to you. But there are no shortage of families who have been torn apart over that. And what the Norwegian government said is that the law requires that all religions that receive government subsidies practice a right to free withdrawal. Like, if there's a serious obstacle to leaving a religion, that's a problem. So disfellowshipping, according to the government administrator who wrote this article, it can cause members to feel pressured to remain in the faith community. And that violates the rules of the tax subsidies. So that was problem number one. By having an excommunication policy, you're making it really hard for people to leave your organization, and that's kind of culty, so you can't do that. Number two was how that practice applied to children. Because if a child in a JW family, like, makes it, according to the Jehovah's Witnesses, if a child makes it a habit to break the moral standards of the Bible and does not repent, children are supposed to be treated like pariahs. That means if there's a young teenager, whether or not they're baptized, who quits the religion, that applies to them too. They may not be kicked out of the house, but the rebellious child is not allowed to have contact with other close family members like grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, or friends. And according to the government in Norway, that I'm sorry, I'm not quoting them. I'm just saying this. This puts pressure on the kids to stay in the religion, which is a violation of their own rights under Norwegian law. According to the government official, we consider social isolation a form of punishment against the child. So, because of those two issues, because they are systematic, because they are intentional, and because the Jehovah's Witnesses did not deny that any of that happens, that's why the government said, yeah, then you're not getting any taxpayer funds. You can practice your religion however you want to, but you're not getting a reward from the government for it. So basically, they Jehovah'd themselves out of 2 million US dollars. And at the time that this happened, like a year ago, the witnesses said, we're going to appeal this decision. We're going to explain why, we're not doing anything wrong. Stop persecuting us because of our religion. There's nothing wrong with it. But that appeal didn't go anywhere. You know why? Because there's no counterpoint. There's no rebuttal to what I just said. Like, the witnesses can do whatever they want. They just don't get a government handout for it. It's not unfair though. Like, the Catholic Church, just to give you one example, they have a lot of problems. But if you quit the Catholic Church, there is no formal policy designed to make you suffer for it. You might have arguments with family members. You might struggle with the loss of your community with shared beliefs, at least for a while. But the church itself doesn't go out of its way to make your life worse. Jehovah's Witnesses absolutely do. And if nothing else, I would hope that this decision spurs other religious groups to look at their own policies, because if they want that sweet, sweet taxpayer money, they need to play by the rules. And so at the end of 2022, the Norwegian government said, okay, you heard our ruling. This is why you're no longer a religious community under the law, so you don't get the taxpayer money. And if you perform a marriage, it doesn't count. Those people you married still have to come to the government to get their official license and all that stuff. And the Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway said, they tried to remedy the program. They said, we're going to make sure you're respecting our beliefs. But long story short, nothing they did made a difference, because at the end of the day, the beliefs are their beliefs. No one's trying to make up any of this. This is what they believe. This is what they do. And now, no matter how much they tried to stop it, they even sued the Norwegian government to try to stop it. There was a trial held in January of this year trying to say, you can't not give us the money. And what happened this week on Monday is that a district court in Norway, in Oslo, announced that, yeah, we heard the trial and the government hasn't done anything wrong. The decision not to give the Jehovah's Witnesses any money in 2022 and 2023 was upheld. Like, the Jehovah's Witnesses were asking for like $3.5 million that they were owed. And the court said, yeah, you're not getting that for the past 2 years, which is hilarious. And on top of that, not only are they not going to get any more money in the future from the government, they also had to pay the state's legal bills, which amounts to like 100,000 US dollars. Hilarious. So they sued to try to get back pay for 2 years. They're not going to get any of that. And the response that I've been hearing from ex-Jehovah's Witnesses is just, thank you. Thank you to the Norwegian government for taking this seriously, not cowering because it happens to be a powerful religious group. That is important. And I think there's also an unintended consequence of this, because citizens are now very alert because of this case. Citizens in Norway are alert to the fact that, hey, we don't need to prop up a church if we don't have an allegiance to it, because their taxes help pay for these religious subsidies. And so a lot of times you might say, yeah, the nation's evangelical Lutheran church, that's the one my family belongs to. I don't really believe in God, but sure, I'll call myself a Lutheran, or I'll call myself a Catholic, even though I don't believe. But when you say you're a Catholic or you say you're a Lutheran, those churches get to call you a member, and they get money because of it. And here's what's really funny about this. In 2016, the nation's Lutheran Church launched a website to try to, modernize themselves, and it made it easier to track members and enroll new ones. But it backfired because thousands of people used the website to opt out of church membership altogether, depriving the church of that government funding. Hilarious. In 2015, by the way, the Catholic Church owed the Norwegian government about 5 million US dollars because it was found that they fraudulently registered thousands of people on their list because they got taxpayer dollars for it. The Catholic Church also created an app for members, again, modernizing it. And then 11,000 Norwegians resigned because all they had to do was click a few buttons and they could say they were no longer Catholic. And it made it a lot easier. And it's not just symbolic. I'm sure it felt good, but ultimately doesn't mean anything. Yes, it does. Because the reason so many people actively went through those motions is because they didn't want the government giving those churches money. And there are plenty of people in the US, maybe you're one of them. You call yourself Catholic, Christian, Lutheran, Methodist, whatever, because it's cultural. It's what you were raised in, even though you don't really believe and you don't go to church anymore. But there's no real incentive to tell the church, hey, take me off your list. I'm not one of you anymore. That's like going to the DMV. Do I really want to go through all that hassle? And for what? In my head, I know I'm not one of them. But in Norway, there is a financial change if you say I want out. It just shows you how many religious institutions in Norway have financially benefited from the apathy of their own lapsed members. For now, though, the bottom line is Jehovah's Witnesses in Norway, they won't be receiving any federal benefits. And it's their own damn fault because their beliefs are cruel and manipulative, and they finally got called out for it. So, yay. What questions do we have about that? I'm sure there are some. Anytime you start talking about JW, you should start with knock knock. Who's there? Yep, because I don't even get knocks on the door anymore. I just get handwritten letters sent to my home. Sometimes written by a child saying, "Hello, I am little Bobby. Come be a Jehovah's Witness." It's like, no, you're going in the garbage. But I don't know. I don't know if I think since COVID, they do less door knocking and more letter writing. I could be wrong about that. Life stance. Is that anything like worldview? Yeah, it might be. I think if I have that context correct, it might be. I prefer religions not get any money from the government, and I agree with you. And they need to pay taxes and publish their financial books. I would love that. That would be wonderful. But in Norway, where they have a national religion, it's the weird thing about Europe, right? Church and state are quite literally intertwined, and a lot of people are non-religious because they just don't care. And in the US, where we ostensibly have separation of church and state, you can't get away from religion. They don't believe in the government. You're not allowed to join. Yeah, the Jehovah's Witnesses don't believe in the government. You're not allowed to join the military. You're not allowed to take blood to save your life. Any of these things causes you to be kicked out. And again, those rules, everyone knows about them. The rule that says you can't receive blood, you can't get a blood transfusion. The government's not saying we're punishing you for that rule. But if you do get a transfusion and they kick you out and you're not allowed to interact with people anymore, that is the thing that is coercive. And that is what the witnesses got punished for. Yeah, it's amazing. But they will take government money after all that. Yeah, it was one of the hypocritical things about all of this. They don't want anything to do with the government, but they'll gladly take taxpayer dollars to promote themselves. Thank you for making that point. Can we get that rule here? I wish. Then again, I'm kind of afraid of that only because the last thing we need is more money going to religious organizations. Isn't that what vouchers are? Giving taxpayer dollars to private religious schools when they should be going to public schools. The last thing we need is for other taxpayer dollars to go to white evangelical megachurches. They don't need it.